Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to It's Rainmaking Time. Paul Smith is a retired Army intelligence officer and Operation Desert Storm veteran. Spent 7 years in the Department of Defense's remote viewing program, serving as operational remote viewer, theory instructor and trainer, security officer, and unit historian. Smith has a BA in Middle Eastern Studies from Brigham Young University and an MS in Strategic Intelligence with a Middle Eastern emphasis from the Defense Intelligence College, and is a doctoral candidate in philosophy at the University of Texas at Austin. He is president of Remote Viewing Instructional Services at www.rviewer.com and is president of the nonprofit International Remote Viewing Association. Please welcome in today Paul Smith as he introduces us to the history of remote viewing, the power of remote viewing, the truth about remote viewing, and the opportunity of remote viewing. Welcome, Paul Smith, to It's Rainmaking Time.
Thanks. This is exciting.
I've been very interested in remote viewing for a long time. And at first, when I thought about it, the ability to see into distant places, objects, people, events, and places, the details of which really shouldn't be supposedly available to us. It was exciting and it was scary at the same time. And I thought to myself, well, then if that's possible, is anything really a secret? And not only is anything really a secret, the question, but does time really exist then? Because in order to go back at that level of the past and to be able to hone in using the protocol and methods of remote viewing, something has to be almost recorded in some dimension or on some level. Can you explain that and also introduce your definition of what remote viewing is?
Well, the short answer to whether I can explain or not is no. However, I can speculate. Well, let's see. No, we actually have two different questions on the table. Maybe I should start with remote viewing.
Please.
Remote viewing, interesting. It's an underlying human phenomenon, human faculty that everybody has, and in fact has been practiced in different forms for probably millennia. But most recently, it was formalized, studied, improved, developed, whatever you want to say, by the U.S. government or on behalf of the U.S. government. It's an ability that all of us have to perceive and become aware of distant places, people, things, or events without having any other connection than our own mental abilities.
Wouldn't the average person associate what you just described as being clairvoyance or being psychic?
Yes, and they might even associate with psychic, but I'll talk about the difference there in a minute. It is actually a form of clairvoyance. In fact, I'll often tell people that I teach a form of disciplined or controlled clairvoyance. But the kind of the difference here, really, it should have been called remote perception. And there actually is a laboratory that did call it that. The PAIR lab, you may be familiar with that, the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab at Princeton University, followed the remote viewing protocol, essentially, added a precognitive element to it, but they called it remote perception. And the reason is this, because it involves not just what you can see, not what you might visualize, but it also involves all the other senses as well. You smell, taste, touch, hear when you're doing a remote viewing session. At least those are available to you. So remote viewing, in a way, is a little bit more than clairvoyance. Clairvoyance, French word for clear seeing or clear vision. And so, again, that focuses more on the visual aspects of it. But remote viewing is a much larger basket of experiences. Now, I should up front put in the caution here that it isn't the same kind of experience one has if one is walking down the street and smelling things and feeling things and seeing things. It isn't that pronounced, it isn't that strong as direct seeing and hearing and smelling in a normal waking environment. But what comes in, I often describe as it's like a half-remembered memory that you know is not a memory you had. So you have, in quality, it is kind of ephemeral, but it is, if you learn how to get into the groove where the information is coming in, the experience is vague but yet present. And when you learn to distinguish that, then you know that you're getting real information, and you are able to then cognize and describe what you're experiencing.
Do you agree that with Ingo Swann, one of the fathers of remote viewing, that this faculty or ability has been a sidelined human function in a world run by scientists and skeptics, and that this is really available to all people who are receptive to this? Is that correct?
I think it's basically correct. And he's right about it being sidelined, although it hasn't always been scientists and skeptics. It's been anyone who is more of a touching. If you can't see it, feel it, smell it, or touch it, it's not real. Those kind of folks aren't always scientists and skeptics, but they tend to reject anything that is subjective or is something they can't really grab a hold of. And that actually came to bite us in the end in the remote viewing military program, because those kind of folks can also be managers in bureaucracies, right? and that ended up being a problem, but we can talk about that later. So
weren't you one of the first people or one of the first teams of formal remote viewers that were trained, or were you?
Well, I was kind of a second generation.
Okay.
When the military program got started, there was a select group of about 6 folks with some part-timers in addition who were chosen to start the program in 1979. I and my colleagues started coming in around 1983, and we, in a way, were I don't want to say product improved, because the folks that went before us were really good. But we had a different approach that was presented to us called controlled remote viewing. It was a more formal, structured method developed by the folks who originally developed remote viewing in general. It was developed. The controlled remote viewing was developed as a way of being able to transfer to non-psychics, people who had not demonstrated psychic ability in the past, transfer to non-psychics some of the functionality that the more accomplished remote viewers have demonstrated. So in other words, it's a transferable skill, and this methodology is developed to make it more transferable, and it worked.
Before we go in more thoroughly into what the applications are, some of the inner workings of how one learns it, I would like you to explain what, in your view, led you into remote viewing, and whether you think it was synchronicity, or it just happened, or divined, or in fact it was just an opportunity that dropped in your lap. And your original first impressions, I think, were interesting in your book titled Reading the Enemy's Mind, Inside Stargate, America's Psychic Espionage Program. I mean, somebody hears that and they're like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Why worry about the National Security Agency going through your data, your internet, and your phone when you got this, right?
That's right. Yeah, I almost want to say magic rather than synchronicity. How I ended up in the program was really a miracle in a way. The irony is, I was just reflecting on this the other day, that you talk about, for example, the popularization of the manifesting phenomenon in The Secret. The Secret talks about this. The idea is that if you wish for things in the right way, ultimately they may come to pass, right? And of course, it's always an uncertain process. But in my case, it really sort of happened. It was a combination of that old song "Taxi." What was it? I can't think of the musician that sang it, but it was the story about this guy and his girlfriend in high school, and they had all these dreams about what they were going to be, do these great things in the world.